Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Slowing Down to Speed Up, Holistic Three-Pillar Training to Transform Your Organization, presented by our Head of Leadership Growth here at Educate 360, Dr. Jay Pugh. My name is Mariela, and I will be assisting in moderating today's session. We are in Zoom for today's webinar, and we will be emailing you a copy of this recording to you after the session. We do encourage participation throughout the session, so please use that chat or that Q&A option for our dedicated Q&A after the presentation. Educate 360 is so excited to present this webinar today. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Dr. J.
Hey, thank you so much. Hey, and good. It's already good to see the chat rolling, and it's great to see all of you joining. Welcome to Holistic Three Pillar Training. We're going to talk about how to slow down to speed up today. For those that haven't been in the chance to spend some time with me, my name is Dr. Jay Pugh. I'm our head of leadership growth with Educate 360, and I'm ready to have some fun with you on telling us why it is beneficial to make sure that in the age of 2026, why it's important to slow down and speed up and how we can do so. And so I want you to think for a moment how fast paced everything is for a moment. And I want you to think on what difficulties come with keeping up with the speed and performance of today's workforce. So as we think on this, I want you to type in the chat what difficulties really are arising. Oh man, I'm seeing good answers right out the gate. I'm seeing burnout, clear communication, or maybe unclear communication may be, occurring. Efficiencies maybe not quite happening as much as they could be. Info overload. I like this. The key word being overload, unclear goals. Scope creeping is a big one. Perception. Everybody is too busy now. Intake, overload, resource turnover. That's a big one. Resource turnover is a huge one that comes into play. And what I love that I'm seeing too is inefficient impulse progress, meaning that when we are finding, that there is growth, we don't take a moment to see what that growth is or what the pivot points are, what changes are being made, and are we making unnecessary changes for the sake of change itself? And I will tell you, I am a massive, massive advocate for constant change. I am. I am a proponent of it. I think change is crucial for success. However, evaluation of change is also critical. And I will tell you that in the age of digital transformation, when we're talking about AI, we're talking about implementation of new tools, new resources. There's changing of the guards, and I agree with this. Stakeholder engagement. We have to wear now multiple hats in what we're trying to achieve. When we run into all these things, this is what ends up happening. And we've done some research in this space, and we found that 70% of all digital transformation initiatives are failing. And one key reason why that is not because of maybe an issue with, maybe it's projects. I mean, that's possible, but and Trisha just took the words completely out of my mouth, which is change fatigue amongst leaders. What is happening is there is a lack of alignment in leadership. There's a lack of approach in the way that leadership's occurring, and everybody is moving too fast for their own good, and not saying that we shouldn't be moving at an accelerated rate or that we shouldn't be creating innovative approaches. But what's happening is that we are building in more things instead of looking for what is better. And that's what it is. I love what Rinku just said, is change for the sake of change or copycat change, right? So and so's doing it, so we need to do it. But one of the things that comes into play is as follows. And I'm going to share one of the first Dr. J tidbits of the way for the day. My question is show of hands, who's ready for it? Who's excited for it? There we go. I love this. See, this is why I like the group. I love the group when they show it. This is it. Ready? First rule of thumb in digital transformation: more is not better. Better is better. Better implement is better. Better strategy is better. More is not better. And what this means for us is we have to slow down to speed up. We have to slow down to speed up. And if we don't, what happens is we create misalignment, chaotic innovation, project scopes that don't get met on time. And these things lead to poor transformation of our approaches we have. And so when I bring this up, there are three major pillars that I always try to make sure of that if we are growing as an organization holistically, there are three major things that successful transformation requires. Number one is a true, strong, unified leadership vision. And this doesn't just mean that I'm going to just throw information at you and say, here you go. Because as Kathy mentioned, and as Rinku mentioned, and as others mentioned, information overload is not the answer. What we need to make sure of is that we have an engaged and bought in culture as it ties to vision. Do people believe in the mission and the vision that's occurring? Do they believe in the changes that are occurring? Is change being just thrust upon them, or is there stake in the change? Number two is technology. But once again, number one rule of technology: more is not better. Better is better. And I'm going to share this in the chat. I want you to think of how many systems you use and with different technologies you implement. How many would you say you probably use if you really had to think about it? 5, 8, at least 4, 10, 3 to 4. Look, I mean, this is where it comes in. The second question that becomes very important, and I love these responses that we're getting, is are they truly useful to the endeavor of your transformation you're trying to achieve? And if I could be Nostradamus for a minute, probably the answer might be not all of them. How many of us would agree with that? Maybe the answer is not all. And part of the reason may not be because of the technology itself, but because of the alignment of what we're trying to implement. And that's where we're starting to see this. We're starting to see that it's agreed, I don't need as many, or we need to make sure we're using the right tools, the right resources. And that leads me to the third pillar that's really key, which is process. How many of us would say that you are firefighters? Show of hands or in the chat. How many of you would say you are firefighters, putting out fires left and right? It is admirable to be the firefighter. It is admirable. It's no, I saw somebody say, I am chief of the firefighting. And I love this because whenever I bring this up, it's important to recognize that firefighting is necessary at times. But if you don't build in better processes, better structures, better approaches, what happens is that you lose efficiency and you run into the same fires that occur over and over again. So these three things have to be at the forefront of our mind. And when we do training, when we look for further education, when we look for those components, we have to make sure that we keep these three things in the forefront of our mind. Because if we don't, if we're missing one, here's what happens. Carla mentioned, so used to being on fire, they don't register as fires anymore. And that's what happens, is that's where the term burnout starts to occur. And so when we're not aligned with these three pillars, if we have great technology, and I'll use a great example. boy, we're at the forefront of AI usage and we're using AI very, very well. And we have so good process in play, but we don't have a true vision or a leadership. What happens is you don't have buy-in from your culture. You don't have culture. You don't have buy-in. You're missing that component. If you're missing process, but you have amazing leadership and we're still adopting all these tools and doing this, it's chaotic. That's where the more more is not better comes into play. It's chaotic innovation. Now you have 38 tools you're using. Well, I'm using Gemini and I'm using ChatGPT and I'm using Copilot. I'm using this. And it's going, well, why? Why are you using all of them? Are we using these? That's chaotic innovation. Well, so and so's doing it. Yeah, we need process. We need to reinvigorate a better process. And if you have an amazing leadership and you have an amazing process, normally what happens in this case is, and I hate to use this term, but how many of you have ever always heard the term, this is the way we've always done it? We've always done it this way. What happens is now there becomes a digital disconnect. And what starts to happen is we fall a little bit behind. And I see ghost emoji coming through. It starts to happen where we have the digital disconnect. And so what happens is that we need all three for that reason, because if you miss one, you run into that pillar and it can't sustain. And so we need our talent ready for this. So when you're looking at these three, these leadership, technology, process, is there any one that you look at and you go, man, I think we might maybe not be missing, but boy, I'd love for us to see if we have, I think we might need more in this space. Is there any one that comes to your mind as you're seeing it? I'll give everybody a moment to type in the chat. Maybe in some cases it's, we're doing great with technology and process, but we're not doing a lot in our leadership space or in our growth. We're not keeping our people as much. We're running into retention issues, or you know what, we do have great loyalty and retention, but we don't have up. And there we go. Okay. Excellent. I'm seeing somebody mentioning process. Projects align with company goals and missions, which is good. I'm like what I'm seeing there. And it does start with solid leadership. I would fully agree with that too. 100%. I love what I'm hearing there. Is there anything that feels like it might be missing? Buy-in. I'm seeing buy-in, change culture, a little bit of training and buy. Good. I love what I'm seeing. I thank you for that. And the reason why this helps is because when we talk about these sort of what sounds most familiar and what comes into play, every organization, does a pretty good job, but some of it's we're behind the eight ball on our AI integrations, or what, we are integrating this, but we're missing a process or a structure and we're doing too much, right? And this is a perfect what Bobby just said. Our leadership has great vision, but we're missing the process to make it happen. Or in other cases, what, I think we have a very loyal, very strong culture that has been established in history, but we're not taking on the technology as quickly as we could or should. Those are components on why we do what we do. I will say it, and I'm not gonna toot a horn. I think for you all to know that information silos is a really good example too, right? And that can also be lack of leadership in that case, Kathy. And not saying it's bad leadership or it's bad leaders. It's really more of though of, does your leaders, have they gone through breaking down those interdepartmental silos? Have they gone through silo busting? Have they done workshops on it? Have they had coaching on it? Have they had consulting on it? Empress mentions a key component of, have they done governance with their AI? Has that been put into place? All of these things, and I think you all have been in many webinars. I've seen some really good familiar faces, which is great. I've seen some new ones as well. I don't take a moment to toot a horn very often, but I think that's one of the reasons kicking off in 2026 of why I'm really proud to work for the organization I do. I think that's why I'm proud to work for Educate 360. Just calling a spade a spade. I think we're one of the very few out there that can be able to look at your organization as a whole and not just take one piece like, oh, well, we do leadership or we do technology or we really do work with you as a partner to say, you know what, if there's a piece that's missing, that's where we can come in and work with you as a partner. And we don't want to be invasive and we don't want to be intrusive, but I think that's something that is where we're really proud on. And so what we do, and for me in particular, what I really value on the mentorship of other leaders and working with organizations over the last, oh, I'm going to hide my age, but let's say close to 2 decades. Um, I found the following techniques to come into play. Number one, when it comes to technology, I help to reduce the fear of the unknown. I find that with technology, I anticipate concerns before they occur. I look for what roadblocks may come into play. If I could share a little funny anecdote, my father recently retired, and he was not a. They have not implemented AI, and he is just like the robots are taking over, is where his mind is. It's very much into that. And I've already kind of anticipated like that would be a thought of where that is. So I've already anticipated questions. I've already anticipated challenges that may be thought. And with our clients, it's the same thing, is that there's this sort of underlying fear of, is AI going to replace me in my role? Is this going to happen? Well, part of what I like to do in the leadership space as it ties to technology is reinforce the fact that the technology is meant to support you to now be the innovator of a new idea. And I'll give an example. We might have to write reports and proposals. Do you know how nice it is that I don't have to do all the upfront legwork of writing the proposal, but I can do better prompting to be able to do that? But I still get the creativity and the final say to say, you know what? I want to make this my words. I want to make this my feel. I want to make this my approach. That's where we can take this succeed or learn mentality to shift to forward practice. We get to be the innovators of our own space. So we reduce fear of unknown and fear of loss. That's one. Number two, I will tell you, in my role as our head of the business, of the leadership side of the business, it is a challenge. And the reason why I say that is because I don't get as much time as I used to. I am in the firefighting state in certain cases, and one of the best advices I've ever received is it's very noble to be the firefighter, but you will save your grace and save your space if you become Smokey the Bear. As the great Smokey the Bear once so eloquently stated, only you can prevent forest fires. And so what that means is if you're running into the same fires consistently over again, I no longer react. Jay, we ran into this and this is happening, and what are we going to do? First thing we're going to do is we're going to settle down. We're going to be all right. We're going to make sure that we're going to slow our brain down. We're going to build a better process, and we're going to make sure that this is effective. And once again, this doesn't mean building a new thing, but it means making an existing process more efficient. One example I like to use is, and I love our salespeople. I will tell you, I think our salespeople are top notch. They're some of the best in the game. But how many of you have probably worked with people in sales and they need answers yesterday? Show of hands, they need answers yesterday. The accuracy, yeah. That's welcome to sales. Yeah, that's part of the game. We know it. And right. And so when that happens, I always love to bring up this idea of my goal is they're going to hit us with a million questions. Now, I can do one of two things. I can consistently answer their questions at all times of the day, across multiple time zones over and over and over again and put out the same fires, or I could build a better process. So we build a sales enablement process. We build better educational tools, quicker, cleaner resources, a subject matter expert process to make those things easier to digest and move. Does that make sense to everybody on the way that you can be able to be more proactive in your process to not run into the same fire? And that's why we teach things like project management and Lean Six Sigma and ITIL and being able to focus on building more frameworks, building better frameworks to support those components. With that said, number 3 is expect to go a little nonlinear with that process, meaning that things may change. You may have to make tweaks, and we have to be comfortable with those tweaks. Changes should be digestible. And that takes me to something that Renee mentioned in the chat that I think is really huge. Doing an assessment of the culture, whether that means engagement surveys or something that I love to do to go a little bit further into the grit and into the depth, is what's called a company culture audit. Going further in to find out the deep is to do something that's an audit or a culture audit to find if what you're going to implement and how you're going to implement, you can catch those roadblocks in advance to get that information and then go nonlinear with your approach. So I think that's a great suggestion. When it comes to the leadership side, the people side, I will tell you, this is one of the biggest fallouts I've ever learned. If you are only engaging your group as a holistic team, we're missing the mark. I am a firm believer of engaging my team as a whole or engaging teams as a whole, but make sure if you are trying to truly motivate and truly connect, you need to make sure you take an individualized approach. Every person has their own layer of engagement, addressing each style. And Renee, a course that I teach that is it's my sort of baby, is a course called Mastering Meaningful Engagement. It's about strategic engagement and connectivity. And one thing I teach is VIPs. It's about understanding people's values, interests, and preferences. So it starts with their style. Maybe it starts with whether it's a social style or whether they're a driving style, an expressive style, an amiable style, an analytical style. But then it goes even further in saying, why do they value that style? What is it about that means something to them? And can I go and meet them where they are? That's where real connectivity begins. So I love that. Those are things that I really try to work with people on a holistic front that does make them thrive, Renee. Absolutely. So that leads me to a little bit of a question. And I'm going to change the way this question is asked a little bit. And Kathy, absolutely it is that mastering meaningful engagement. It's within all of Educate 360. It certainly is. Yep. So you'll find it on the New Horizons website. You'll find it on the Watermark Learning website or Educate 360 as a whole. You will find it there. Absolutely. So when we talk about what leadership skill you feel like might be most underdeveloped, I want you to think about this. And I don't mean this in a bad way. I don't want you to think of like my leader stinks because of this. Like it's not what we mean here. But it's called the magic wand question, which is like if you had a magic wand and your leaders could be exactly what and how you would want them to be, what would that look like? What skill would you want them to have? Oh, okay. So I'm seeing communication. I'm going to challenge this audience that we're going to have a little fun and challenge this. When we say communication, because we could dive into communication in a couple different ways. Do we mean communication more in being more influential? Is it more of transparency? Is it more of um, conciseness? Is it uh, Yes, I love what I'm seeing here, right? Communicating how roles impact vision, delegation is a key component, feedback, language, stakeholder engagement is huge. Silo busting I saw sent to host and panelists. And once again, if you want to change from host and panelist to everyone and have everybody see those, these are great answers. Negotiation. Sometimes it's assertiveness. Sometimes it's empathy. When we mention this, I'm a huge believer in growing your people. The hardest piece is strategy development and adapting to the styles. The problem with people is that for 40 years, 50 years, how many of us have ever heard of the carrot or the stick approach? Carrot or the stick. There we go. There's an advantage to the carrot and the stick, but there's one, and it's a good short-term initiative, right? Everybody loves rewards. Everybody knows that sometimes we got to have a little push, right? Once in a while. But what is the biggest issue with carrot or stick approach when it comes to people? Hey, we're not animal. I saw somebody put we're not animals. That's a really good start. Yep, we are certainly not. There can be a devaluation or a demotivation. It can be non-critical. It can shut down communication. And Rinku, what I really like about this is it almost creates a layer of transaction, not transformation, right? It's almost like you're just going to be focused on what you do, not who you are in what you do. And real leadership requires us to look at a key difference of looking at another person and go, who are you in what you do? And do I see that? So, one thing we teach in a course we call Becoming a Transformational Leadership is how I get people to grow and climb. And I'm actually going to use a little John Madden, rest in peace, teleprompter kind of demonstration here. I always like to look, and this is where investing into potential and commitment come into play. And this is where I look to see on the way of where do I need my people to be and where are they currently. This is how to build. We talk about like high performing teams, right? The first piece is level one. And level one comes down to two major pieces. How much time have I spent with them and how much buy in do they have? And so level one is going to be a type of employee that follows. Typically, a level one employee leader relationship is going to be either A, that the employee is brand new to the organization. So they don't really know anything about the way the organization works. They don't know any of the intricacies. So it's a lot of learning out the gate, right? So in the beginning, the leader kind of decides a lot of things. I'm going to onboard you. You're going to learn X. You're going to do Y. You're going to do Z. There's not a lot of back and forth in the dialogue. It's a lot of leader taking on, deciding, making that effort. That's level one. The second one that comes into play that is in the bad form of this sometimes, and I'm going to say a word, and I guarantee you this is going to make everybody's hair on their neck stand up, is micromanagement. I'm going to tell you what to do. I'm going to take this on. I'm going to take this. I'm going to tell you this is what this looks like. And we can't stay in level one, can we? So, how do we get out of level one? How we get out of level one is we spend time in the teach. And this is going to be where we learn the 4T model. So the first layer of this is to teach. So when I've had somebody new join my team, the first thing I spend time with is teaching. I will walk them through things. I will walk them through existing processes. I will make sure that there's room for education, questions to be asked, make sure that there's those sort of components. And what starts to happen that gives me a clue that they're ready to move, and this is what I call like 1.5, is that my time starts to get more involved with them and they start to get a little bit more buy-in. What starts to happen is they start to make more suggestions. Like, what if I did this? What if I did that? What if we tried this? And that's where you want them to start to go, is now they feel a little bit more autonomy to speak up. They feel a little bit more empowered to speak up. And so when that starts to happen, please don't shut down the idea and go, nope, we've always done it this way, so we can't. Or no, we can't do that. No, we can't do that. Because then what's going to happen is they're going to retreat back to level one. So what I love to do is I talk it out. I will talk it out. I like this idea because of this. I will say that we've tried X and that didn't work because of this and this. So I'd love to see if there's a different alternative we can bring to this. But you want to talk out things with them. At the end of the day, you're still going to be making the decision because they're not ready to just run with it. And so where we get to next is level 2. And level 2 means you're spending a lot of time with them. This is where coaching, collaboration, connecting, this is the relationship build, collaboration of ideas. What do you think? What do I think? That's where a lot of time gets spent. And what's really great about this is where the biggest relationships get built. The only disadvantage is for higher level leaders, what happens is your time ends up getting really eaten to where you don't get the visionary approaches to create the changes in the processes that you need to. So then what happens is we get involved in everybody's fire. We get involved in everybody's problems. And so when this happens, this is an advantage because they're feeling like they can come to you. They're feeling like they can do that. But the challenge becomes reliance, and we have to be cautious of that. So what I do is instead of talking it out, I start tailoring questions because ultimately, as Renee just said, I want to make sure that they can thrive in the role or thrive in that place, even if I wasn't there. So I will start tailoring questions. I would start asking questions. And one of my favorite questions, and I'll ask it one of two ways. I'll ask it, one is the super positive, fun way, and then the other way is the way I would normally ask it, is who I am and my personality. The super fun way is, what if I won the lottery tomorrow? What would you do? You know, that starts to create the autonomy question, right? The other way I ask it is, what if I was hit by a bus? Now, I know that's a little more grim, but I'm a realist. So that's a little bit more on my space. But I start tailoring questions of, what if I wasn't here? And what if this wasn't done? And what if that they were on vacation next week? What would you do? How would you approach it? And what you're trying to get them to do is to take more autonomy for them to start making decisions. So I'll start tailoring questions. I'll start making a suggestion here to throw it out there. But guess what? It's no longer that I'm deciding anything. We're going to empower them, or as Kouzes and Posner talk about, we're going to enable them to act. And when that happens, what you start to look for, you're empowering them to act. Then we get to the place of trust. I have to give them the ball. And this is where, when you know they got it, but they still come back to you to ask questions, this is where what we call succeed or learn mentality comes into play. Succeed or learn. And Sarah asked a really good question that I'm going to hold until a little bit of the end, because I think that's a really big one that I want to bring up when we get towards the end. This is huge. An action does equal trust or lack of trust. But to get to trust, we have to make sure that there's other layers that got to that trust. So because of this, that's how I get people to grow and climb in transformation. But the first pillar of this that's so important is teaching. It's training. It's education. It is investment in our people. And I did a webinar last month that I think I see a couple familiar faces that if we don't invest in people, they do leave. They go to places that do. That is a true factual statement from SHRM, from Deloitte, from Qualtrics. It is very clear, and the cost of replacing them is expensive. So because of this, the carrot and the stick no longer is as effective as it used to be. They're decent. They're good to pull out once in a while. Hey, there's a project, we need to get it to the end of the line, or we need to get it across the finish line. Great. Let's pull out a carrot, right? I don't use the stick. I mean, I really don't unless we're really running into. I always use that as a very, very, very last resort. But one thing that I try to take more proactively in my approach as a leader is the plant technique. And plant leadership is something where I recognize the value of their style, their values, their interests, their principles, their preferences. I really try to use it to build more sustainable growth with them as people. And so the way I like to do this is I like to kind of imagine that how many of us have plants in our homes or plants outside our homes, maybe? Anybody murder their plants on accident? Please don't do that here. That's the one request I will have. Brown thumb. Love this. Got a brown thumb. Very good. Brown thumb indeed. And so I mention this because the way I try to view leadership is I try to have the greenest thumb when it comes to being a plant leader. And I pretend that my people are plants of some kind. And they may shift in certain components. But here's the 5 different type of plants that I try to look at them in certain areas. And I'm going to use some examples that I really think is, and I'm going to not use real names here, but I'm just going to kind of use a differentiation. But I will tell you that first and foremost, I myself am a cactus. I am a cactus. I'm primarily, most times I'm a cactus. Put me out in the heat. I don't mean to be uncouth when I say this, but I think one of the main reasons that my boss and I get along as well as we do is because she puts me out in the heat. She lets me thrive. And then if I need to ask for something, that's perfect. That though you'll know who they are. And not trying to say there might be a little prickly, but you'll know when that is. They might be a little prickly because they just want to be out in the heat. Let them thrive. Let them be out there. They don't want to be surrounded. They want to be out. So I myself, I'm a little bit more of a cactus. And I have another person, let's say their name is Samantha, is that, and very operationally minded, but really wants to make sure that that's where it is. Like, let me do. I got this. So I take that approach and let them out in the sun. Another one that's kind of an opposite of this is the orchid. And the orchid is attention and careful, specific care to flourish. Orchids are more delicate. And I don't mean soft. I don't want us to think that they're just sensitive but they are more empathetic. They like more close collaboration. They like more dialogue. They like more relationship building. This is where they want you to be able to support the growth. And let's say I have a person named, Jack, that is really geared more in this space of care, like real care. So they'll ask for more one-on-ones. They'll ask for more sort of frequent touch bases. They want to connect. And Kathy, you bring up a really good point about this can change depending on how long a person's been in a role or within a particular project, maybe, or a particular initiative. And it could also be where their role is. It could also be geared around their own personality and style, right? Their own behavior and style. So when I say this, I say I'm a cactus, but I will tell you that there are times that I will shift to what's next is known as the rainforest plant. And I have a person on my team, let's say Sue in this case, is really thrives on continuous learning and stimulation. This person will ask 1,000 questions. This person wants to know more, wants to learn more, gain more. And that's Renee, the key thing is where is their starting point? Because that helps you to see them for who they are. And then as they shift, you shift with them. So this is where I offer stimulation. I give them opportunities to learn more, try more, do more. You test them out in there. You give them the rain. That's why they're a rainforest. You put the rain, right? You throw the rain on them and you give them more and you give them more and you give them more. The fourth one is the deciduous tree. Now, for anybody that's in the Great Lakes area or the Northeast where there's a lot of color changes in the trees, this is where they want to explore. They want to change their colors. I want to try something new. I want to go and I want to see this. Can I test this? I want to, they play the game almost as if, what if? What if we tried? What if we did? What if we, they don't want you to stifle their creativity. That's the deciduous. They want to have room to be creative. So they want to be able to change their colors at times. They want something new that's out there and not just learn new information, but try new things. That's the deciduous tree. And I have a person on my team, let's say, I'll just say the name is Dave. That is these things. That is really in this area that he is more deciduous, but then there's times that he will shift a little bit more to the cactus and say, okay, I've tried this. Now I need you to let me run with this. Don't pull the plug on this. Just let me run with this, please. And you got to let them fly. The last one's the palm tree. And the palm tree is flexible. They really want their own pace. They like palm trees grow. They take time to grow. They like a good system of growth. They can handle getting smacked around with the wind because they built a system of growth. They built the system. They are normally more procedural. They like predictability. They like structure. They don't like a lot of change. I would say they're a little bit more opposite than the deciduous tree, just like kind of like the cactus and the orchid is a little bit more opposite. So in saying this, I want you to think about, and I love where other people are already starting to find where they are. Like, I'm a little bit more palm tree and cactus. I will tell you, for me, I'm a little bit more cactus and rainforest. That's where I am. Where are you all? Think about where you all. If your leader could lead you the way you wanted to be led, what would you want? Where would you want them to lead you? I like this. I like this. I like there's a mixture here, right? This is good. Very good. And that's where Trisha, I like what you mentioned is I'm a rainforest, but then I get too much and I cause a jam. So that may be, do you know what? I have to slow down in being a palm tree and I have to build I have to build a system. And we can be, Jacqueline, and that's why I always look for that's why being a plant leader, that's why being a plant leader is so important. Because you have to meet with your people and you have to look at them and go, you know what? I think I'm pouring a little too much rain on them and I need to let them take time to absorb and digest and get it down and build a system and move them to a palm tree for a little bit. And that was a question that Sarah just asked is, can we approach situations like entering the type of forest? It really is. I always try to look for where people's starting points are when they communicate, right? That's where I try to look at. So for instance, Kathy says, I want to get to Cactus, but if my manager likes to roll, I kind of have to flex and work with the pace and keep going. But knowing that, hey, if that's where you work, Kathy, I would probably, as a leader myself, I would go, do you know what? I got to give you more opportunities to run with the ball and put you out in the heat. As leaders, we got to meet our people where they are. But then, if there is from there, what Sarah asked is, can we approach different situations like entering a type of a forest? Absolutely, we can. That's where maybe Kathy, I've left her out in the sun a little too long, and she's like, "Hey, yo, could I get a little water? I got a couple questions. I got to learn some things." And maybe that's where we pull her inside, pour some rain on the rainforest. That's plant leadership. It's longer, it's more sustainable, it's growth focused. That's how we need to lead. So, with that said, I know we're coming up close to 10 minutes to the hour. I love to leave a little bit of room for questions at the end, or areas. And that's exactly right, Carla, is meeting them where they are to lead them where they need to go. That's it. I don't think you can lead anybody without going to where they are first. I fully agree with you. So let's open the floor up to questions. There's one question in particular that I saw, but I'm going to pass the mic over to Mariella, who's fantastic, and I'm going to pass this over to her and see what questions she may have found, just in case if I miss some.
Absolutely. Of course. Yeah. We have a really fun couple of insights. Thank you all so much for joining in, for throwing all of these suggestions in here. Which question do you got on your deck, Dr. J?
So the question that I saw that I want to come back to, and there's just been so many good feedback that's coming in, so I'm going to go back to it. Is It was from Sarah, so give me 30 seconds. And I had it and then I lost it because everything was coming in. It was so good.
Yeah,
Uh
absolutely. We also just got a question in from Kathy, so you can take a
yeah,
peek over that.
yeah.
We also had this really awesome input. So yeah, Kathy said, do you have any additional courses you can also recommend to help? This has been a lot of great info. Thanks so much for
Hmm.
your question.
Yeah, so a couple classes that I really try to consider, and I would say this, first and foremost, if you haven't done a like behavioral assessment and done a workshop with that, I'm a huge fan of like our social styles courses that we have. The main reason why is because I'm a firm believer of leading the self, leading others, and then leading the system or leading the org. Leading the self starts with that sort of social style assessment. Knowing who you are and the way you lead is really critical. So, introduction to social styles or understanding behaviors using social styles, two really great courses we have there. Another course that I'm a huge fan of is Mastering Meaningful Engagement. This is more strategic communication. It's really understanding not only why you value the way you value things, but really understanding what deeper values you need to use to adapt and meet people where they are. Um, the um, the plant leadership, where you're going to find that is in effective leadership through coaching and becoming a transformational leader. Those are two classes that we have that cover those areas. Those would be some key suggestions in those areas where I would say.
Fantastic. Awesome direction. I know that a lot of people here come to these sessions knowing a little bit more, knowing not a whole lot about the landscape, but walking away with a lot of great direction. I did find that question from Sarah. What do you do if a manager is not even thinking about the different levels? I believe this is
This
going
goes
back.
back to, yeah, that's the question. And thank you for that. I really appreciate it. This is where, like, if they're not even thinking about these four levels, I'm a firm believer that every leader should be going through something like this. They should be learning what those components are in growth. If they're not thinking on that level, how do we I normally try, if it depends on where you're coming from. If they're somebody that they're a peer, I try to have that one-on-one conversation to kind of say, hey, I learned something pretty cool. I don't know if you've ever seen this before, but this is pretty neat, and have them watch the webinar. If it's something of you're reporting to them, I always please throw me under the bus. Like, hey, do you know what? I saw something really cool. And, I've learned that even in my role, not being in a leadership role, I've learned that I really value these four things. And I'd love to be able to walk through this with you if that's okay. And being able to just offer it as like a positive suggestion of like relationship build. If you're somebody that the person's below, sign them up. Sign them up, and I can't. They won't regret it. They will learn so much in such a positive way.
Fantastic. Awesome. We had another question come in. Do we have any questionnaires that we can give to employees? That was such a great question.
Yeah, so that's where so within, you'll see behind me within Tracom, we have Tracom social style assessments. The social style assessment is our major assessment questionnaire. It goes into great detail about findings, behaviors, and not just regular behaviors, but observable behaviors that can also be seen. The reason why I kind of like that, and for those, I think somebody mentioned they did emergenetics, and I think somebody mentioned they did DISC. I like to call the Tracom social styles like DISC on steroids. And the reason why I mention that is because it not only answers how you perceive yourself, but it also can answer is how you perceive yourself. Is that how others see you too? So that's where it ties back to the tree questionnaire, because the driving style is more of the cactus and the palm trees more of the analytical. The orchids more of an amiable style. The rainforest is more expressive. And the deciduous kind of lives in a little bit more of a balance, the inside of them all, to where they want to just kind of flex and go in different areas.
Excellent. I saw someone asked for the link. I'll drop it right now. Not only that link, but a link to a bunch of our really awesome links that you can find a lot of more info out. Go, just dropped it in. And we also had another question come in from Don.
Yeah.
How do you communicate, in parentheses, suggest that things are not necessarily how it is being perceived? Staff level feel different about current culture than leadership see it. Would this shake out in a company culture audit?
Yeah, I personally I would say yes. Typically the reason why I do like going to a third party in these cases, and it's not when we do these sort of audits, or when organizations, not just Educate 360, but when organizations typically do a company culture audit, they will lay out what is consistent as well. So it's not just saying what isn't consistent, like, hey, your people see it this way and you see it this way. We will showcase what is aligned. Hey, your people and your leadership both see that, this is an organization that values not just being behind a desk all day, or they value being in a space where there is heavy collaboration. But there are going to be some findings that may differ. And that's where we're going to say, hey, there is a little bit of differentiation to where the leadership group is finding that the amount of meetings they have seems to be building connection. But the other group of people have found that the amount of meetings that are happening is actually stifling productivity, to where they'd love some shared spaces in between instead. So maybe less status meetings. So that's where, like, when we come in and do those interviews, those findings, when we present them, that's where a culture audit really comes into play. Um, that is the number one way that we have found it to be effective. And not saying engagement surveys don't do it, but think of engagement surveys as you're getting a lot of very bite-sized pieces, whereas an engagement survey is you get larger chunks of that bite. That's a phenomenal question.
Yeah, it's great to break it down bite by bite. Awesome. Alrighty. Well, that was the last of our questions. I did see that they mentioned the plant breakdowns. I'll definitely drop we'll send over a couple of blogs and info that we have on that as well. We don't have a link for that, but I do believe that that is a great resource that we can send over to y'all. So be on the lookout for that in the follow-up email. But in the meantime, I also went and dropped a couple of links, dedicated to Educate 360, our workforce trends, and a little bit more about those social styles that we mentioned. All of that tied together really speaks to the larger picture that Dr. J was kind of covering today. So I would love for y'all to check those out. And if you want to take a peek at this recording, if you want to go back and look over some of the amazing insights that we went over today, we'll also be following up with the recording with you in the email after the webinar. So thank you all so much. Awesome. Oh, yep, we're dropping in links. Love it. Thank you so much, Dr. Jabe. If you missed out on any part of the session, be sure to check out that follow-up email. But that will be it for us. So thank you all so much for joining us today. And thank you so much, Jay, for all of these fantastic insights.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. And like I said, with the links for Educate 360, when Mariella is mentioning blogs and things like that, we are very heavy with trend reports and everything that's on LinkedIn. I highly recommend connecting with us because we do produce a lot of good information. So check us out there and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Always. Alrighty, everyone. Thank you again. Have a fantastic rest of your day and week. And we'll see you all very soon in the next one. Bye for now.